Good evening, curious listeners, and welcome to Wilhelm Presents Frightening Tales and Other Weird Stories. I'm your host, Wilhelm. Each week I invite you to dim the lights and settle in as we explore the dark and unsettling tales of the paranormal. Stories conjured by authors from all over the world. If you dare to share a fiction of your own, submit one at fightingtales.com. And should you find yourself still hungry, there's more than 120 previous episodes awaiting you, patiently in the dark. Today's tale is written by U.S. writer Kaci Skiles Laws, a closet cat lady and creative writer who reads and writes voraciously in the quiet moments between motherhood and managing Crohn's disease. She was a 23 winner of Button Poetry's short-form contest, and her short story, Eugene, was nominated for a Pushcart Prize in 22 by Dead Skunk magazine. Her most recent poetry has appeared in 3 Elements Review, River Teeth Journal, and Blood Tree Literature, as well as elsewhere. Her poetry books, Strange Beauty and Summer Storms, are available on Amazon, and her most recent chapter book, Smile Child, is available from Bottle Cap Press. Her collection of 2-sentence horror stories and short fiction, Whose Hand Was I Holding?, were published in 23. You can find her at kacskyleswriter.wordpress.com. All links will be in the notes. And now, her tale. POTSY.
My sister was lying flat at the back of the yard when we found her. She looked like a baby bird that had fallen from a nest, the same color as a robin's egg. Her basket sat untouched except for the gold egg, broken in 2 on the ground beside her. It was empty because whatever was inside of it before was now lodged in her windpipe. Her eyes stared up at the sky, blank and lifeless. It was raining the day Millie died. Not while she died or even before, but as the ambulance pulled away and for the remainder of the day. It was Easter, and the hunt was over. My cousins and I picked through the eggs we found. I helped Millie fill up her basket because she was only 2 years old, and this felt like a disadvantage to me. I think sometimes it was me who killed her, the gold egg, one different from all the rest. I wanted her to have it before anyone else saw it. It rained for 2 months after we buried Millie. A rain that was dark brown, a rain that smelled like decay. It soaked into the walls of our house and left a dampness that couldn't be lifted but with fire and smoke. My mom burnt sage and pine throughout the house, trying to take away the heaviness that had settled so deep into the wood. So deep at the bottom of our stomachs, like boulders forever lost inside of us. Spring is usually bright, but that year it was gray through May and into June. The storms were louder somehow, more threatening. Or it could have been that our ears listened more intently to the dangers around us. Our house sunk and seemed to set in roots. It cracked and shifted. The doors were either too stiff to open or popped loudly as you left a room, like the house was alive and moving at its own will, tossing its brittle bones about as if it'd grown tired of standing upright. The wind groaned through my room, and it felt as if the house was breathing, and I was living inside its lungs, forever trapped there on the nights that a thing I call POTSY wouldn't let me rest. POTSY was the scratching beneath the floorboards that I had passed off as raccoons or opossums, maybe rats in the crawl space. But raccoons and rats and opossums don't sing. It was faint at first. I could barely recognize it, but soon I heard it clearly. Millie's favorite song from one of my parents' records. Tiptoe through the window, by the window. That is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with me. Oh, tiptoe from the garden, by the garden of the willow tree, and tiptoe through the tulips with me. I remember his name because it reminded me of a little kid's name. And Millie would say, "Sing, Tiny Tim, sing, Tiny Tim," which meant she wanted me to play the song over and over. Tiny Tim was long dead, like Millie. POTSY came into his throat too, through the microphone, while he sang the song Millie loved so much, and squeezed his heart until it stopped beating. POTSY was everywhere and nowhere. It was the most afraid I've ever been as a creeping dread came over me, and Tiny Tim's high-pitched, predatory lullaby rose up around me. I threw the covers over my head and plugged my ears, but the music only got louder as if it were coming from inside my own head. The muggedness of my breath in the space of my confines became suddenly more suffocating as my blanket started to slowly slip off of me. I jerked it back and felt the slow tug return, gentle and persistent, so slow it was as if my covers were just melting to the floor like covers sometimes do. And there was nothing sinister about that, except there was. The next night I decided the room was too loud when it was quiet, so I turned my box fan on to drown out every other noise. Tiny Tim, the splintered scratching, covers slipping, howling wind. Now arose a new problem. A word repeating through the drone of my fan. It said, "POTSY, POTSY, POTSY." Too afraid to move, I convinced myself I'd invited the word and repeated it inside my head to soothe myself like a person with obsessive-compulsive disorder or Tourette's. I tried to hear a different word, but it persisted. "POTSY, POTSY, POTSY," until I fell asleep counting each POTSY. The next morning I asked my mom, "What's POTSY?" She looked at me with her tired eyes, confused. "Ask your dad." When I asked him, he said, "Oh, it's just an old game for kids, kind of like hopscotch." "Why?" "I just thought of it. I wondered if it was real." Dad nodded and went on to explain the game. Sometimes they'd throw broken pottery or flat stones, and other times coins or smashed cans, whatever they had available. "Eggs?" I asked. thinking of Millie. No, not eggs, never eggs. Eggs would just roll away and get lost. I thought about the egg I gave Millie the day she died. That had been a game too, one that turned out not to be any fun. None of the parents had packed a gold egg and no one knew how it ended up there. They all knew Millie was too little for anything but soft chocolates and marshmallow eggs. So the coroner cut Millie's neck open to reveal the jawbreaker that had been hidden inside of the egg and then inside of Millie. I only knew because I was very good at hearing all the things that I wasn't supposed to hear. I saw where they stitched her throat closed before she went to live in the ground forever. I wasn't supposed to see, but everyone was preoccupied, just like on the day Millie died. It was hard not to be curious, in search of something. So of course I pulled down the high collar of my dead sister's dress and peeked as far as I could see. POTSY came to my mom first, not long after Millie's funeral. She just didn't know its name. It was a game that wasn't very fun, more like a compulsion. Her doctor kept prescribing her more and more pills because nothing would take her sadness away. Late at night, she would lock the bathroom door and line up all the bottles. There were 5 now, and she would decide which one to swallow whole. Afterward, she'd throw up all the pills and cry. She would lie to the doctor later and say, no, that one didn't work either, so she could get more pills. She never actually took them except all at once. She was saving them for the day POTSY would stop whispering in her ear. How can you be so selfish? POTSY didn't want the game to end. The game my dad played with POTSY was called euthanasia. At Dad's work, they played because that's where Dad had unlimited access to drugs strong enough to kill a horse. There was no fail system, just the turn of a key in the cabinet where the IV was kept next to the pentobarbital. He used it hundreds of times throughout his career. It would have been an easy game. But POTSY made Dad shake so much, he kept missing the vein in his arm. He would then lock the cabinet back up and let out a sigh that only him and POTSY could hear, because they only played the game when Dad was alone, just like with me and Mom. Remembering Millie became almost mechanical for all of us. I'd like to think Millie never knew POTSY, but she did, even though the games they played were less malevolent up until the end. Millie knew loss. She cried when ants ate caterpillars, knowing they'd never be butterflies. She had an aversion to sad moments in movies because they hurt too much. If I cried, she cried too, the loudest, and held my face in her small hands. She would get peroxide, Neosporin, and Band-Aids until I was all better. When we released our dog's ashes into the wind on the Brazos River, it would have been easy to say she doesn't understand. But she understood better than all of us. She collected exoskeletons of cicadas, gave them ceremonies because there was no one else to care. The world was so complex, but to her, it was very simple. I knew then that POTSY did not spare tiny humans. It knew they felt the most, and it still showed no empathy. I'd like to think POTSY wanted to play Easter with Millie, and it went terribly wrong. I knew POTSY didn't work that way because POTSY doesn't think. It just is. One night in my bed, I held on to the gold egg, sleepless, box fan off, popping the plastic egg open and closed, open and closed. It was the only noise I could tolerate after everything that happened. POTSY was silent that night, crouched in the corner of my room, so still, listening and blending in as if it seeped through the walls, its arms and legs an extension of the floorboards. My eyes adjusted just fine. My nightlight allowed just enough light for me to see it. It was barefoot. Its fingers were much too long, its hair just shadows twisting around its face that was a mass of contorted features that never made any sense. Just moved and became more and more serious the longer I studied it, though all I wanted was to look away. I dropped the egg, and it rolled over to POTSY. The shadow bent down, swallowing it, and disappeared into the floorboards. It would be back. It would never leave. It would coax me to the spot where Millie opened the gold egg in secret and took her last breath. It would become the gnarl in the tree watching me. It liked to hide, but mostly it yearned to be found. It loved company. The games were endless when POTSY played. Millie, in some ways, was lucky to live a short, bliss-free life, free from years of unforeseen circumstances and tragedy. My parents would never agree. But they weren't me, living across from my dead sister's room, forever turning the gold egg in my hand that killed her, which had been hiding in our yard, waiting. We all knew POTSY, but we'd never speak of it out of fear. We were prisoners to it, cowards to admit something in our lives was skewed too much to ever be put back the way it was, or that living with POTSY was harder than anything any of us would ever do. We were alone in our individual holding cells of suffering. Of course it took over our lives like a chokehold, and we let it. POTSY was the game. A kaleidoscope of memory, half dead, skewed and full of broken teeth, rattling each time it turned, letting no light in, just spinning darkness. It was the house, sour air, dank rain, a jawbreaker cut from Millie's throat. It was Tiny Tim. It was Mom, pouring 30 Klonopin into her quivering mouth, and Dad, trembling so hard he dropped all the pieces to his death game on the floor, a cacophony of noise turning itself over and over, changing shape and distorting itself to say something and nothing. Just
POTSY, POTSY, POTSY.
Thank you, dear listeners, for venturing into the dark with me tonight. Return next week for another tale lurking just beyond the veil. If you enjoyed your journey with me, Support my work. Like, subscribe, rate, or leave a comment where possible. Most of all, share frightening tales and support the authors who dared to dream these machinations. Until next time, when a new tale creeps across the airwaves, listen closely if you're brave enough.